Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, the first of the new year. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Deuce85, and yes, it is the true first CBB Supershow of the new season. We've done some previews all summer long. We did some previews the past 2 weeks. Getting a little bit of a late start tonight. Had to do some extra work, Sunday evening. But we're here. We're doing it, and we're breaking down our first CBB slate of the new season. And, it's like Christmas around here. I got those, butterflies, and I just can't sleep. And I keep looking over, CS Fullerton, practice report. Like, I don't know, dude. I'm just super jacked. I'm super jacked about this one. Hey, Don in the house watching us live. Wouldn't miss the show. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate it, man. I know it's late on the East Coast for a lot of folks, but we do pretty well on demand and live and all of that. So I do appreciate that support. Going to have some betting opportunities. Definitely we'll talk about that. Going to break through and do the game-by-game thing on DraftKings. Going to be focused on DraftKings, the FanDuel slate. Leaves a little something to be desired. We can talk a little bit about FanDuel in the Discord tomorrow and stuff if people are actually playing there. But CBB is DraftKings time. Before we get into it, I do want to mention we are running this promotion right now. 50% off your first month, any subscription. That's at FTN Bets. That's at FTN Daily. You use the code NIGHTHOOPS. That's NIGHTHOOPS. NIGHTHOOPS. 50% off. They came up with the Night Hoops because I do these shows at nighttime. 50% off. If you haven't been with the FTN Network before, you just maybe looked at some of the free shows that we offer on the YouTube channel here, and you've been kind of curious about what we offer, let me tell you, this is a really good time to get in. Starting it off here, there's going to be less college basketball content out there from other places. Some people who were in the space before, they're not going to be providing this year. There are sites that I wouldn't dog out by any means, but I think our content and our team stacks up against anyone out there. We really do live, breathe, and eat all of the college basketball from the high major level, mid-major level, low major. I mean, I'm out here watching Big West games, Pac-12 games, Big Ten. I really watch a lot of college basketball, and I can't watch all of them live, of course, but I stay up late usually every night, and I watch a lot of games on demand and stream them on ESPN+. We offer written content for every single slate. We have Discord, which, breaking down all the late news, breaking news, injury stuff, all the starting lineups. We use stat broadcast for that. Even password protected games do not keep us out. We have access to the games through that, because we know the password. And we just are able to process this stuff and also offer potentially – don't have an optimizer, but I am looking at minutes projections and possibly having more in-depth player pools this year. There will be some Discord members-only shows that we do pre-lock a few times this season. There's just so much going on. And then, of course, you have access to the NFL, NBA, NHL, esports, golf, NASCAR. Like, there's everything, man. Everything you could possibly want, you can get at FTN. And we have amazing tools, especially at that pro level. But I'm very, very excited. We are going to get into it here in a minute. Hey, Don. Well, the Discord it's part of the sub. So if you were to become an FTN member, yes, you actually would be added to the Discord there. They have a few different packages, but I mean, give it a shot. Give it a shot, my man. I do think you'll like it. All right. So before I get into this slate, I had a little something that I wanted to read here, and it's my own little take on 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and I thought it was a a good thing to read to you guys and just get everybody into the mood. And if you're not signed up to FTN, maybe this will put you in the mood to check out FTN content. All right, ready? 'Twas the night before the college basketball season, and all through the crowd, everybody's confident, especially your favorite tout. The time is here, and the clock is ticking. It's going to be winners that we're always picking. Visions in our head of all those green screens. If you're a true grinder, I know you know what I mean. Before we get started, there's one last thing to say. I really can't wait to see who will be the posh play of the day. All right. That doesn't get you hyped up. I just don't know what will. Wrote that myself. Feel pretty good about it. All right, let's get into this slate. 12-game DraftKings slate. Let's talk about what they're offering. The FanDuel slate is really just kind of barren. All right, so that's what they did last year for college basketball. They've done well for college football, but we'll see if they add more. Right now, we have a showdown slate on DraftKings tomorrow between Georgia and Oregon. Definitely can talk about that tomorrow in the Discord as we're coming up, but primarily just going to talk about the main slate here. They have the first, what they're calling the king of the bracket qualifier, number one, at the $95 level. Now, that to me is the mania. Usually that doesn't start until a couple of months into the season. They have multiple a day, and it's just this big race to get the 64 spots filled up. I'm always going to refer to that as mania. It's just mania to me. If you've been around a long time, that's just what we call it. But that's their version, I guess, of what they're calling it now, the king of the bracket. It's weird that they're doing it so early. That tells us they're probably going to space it out. They'll have one, on opening night here. They'll probably have another one in a couple of days, couple of weeks, and they won't have to be forced to put them all into like a 1 month period, which is kind of silly anyways. So that's kind of fun. They also have the $33, which is $1K to first. Their $10, which is $10K to first, 3,500 entrants. Very doable there if you're a MME player. And then the normal allotment of, $12 GPP, $50, all the double ups, all that stuff. So I know that if you're an NBA player or any of these other pro sports, you might look at that and say, that's not very much, but trust me, that's pretty damn good. We need to make sure we get that filled so that we can continue to have like mini max and higher, $15, $20 tournaments and 5K, 10K, all this stuff. So let's do our job. Let's get that filled up. All right. What's up, Jody Valvez? What's up, guys? Oh yeah, my man there on the Twitch, watching us on Twitch there. Appreciate it. Let's get into this slate now, guys. We've done all the housekeeping, talked about the offerings, the discounts, gave you my little take on 'Twas the Night Before, and we're ready to get into this 12-gamer. So let's do it. All right, so first game on the slate, we're going to talk about Samford versus Purdue. Purdue comes in as 19.5-point favorites. The total is 144. You're going to see most of the games on the slate somewhere between 140 and 144, 145. There's not a lot of prop offerings. A lot of the totals are kind of just jammed in there. This is because as good as Vegas is in books, don't get me wrong, they're not really sure what to expect. There's so much different with, rosters turning over. Some teams are in new conferences. There's just a lot of uncertainty here, and that's going to cause a little bit of, mush when it comes to the betting side here. The 19.5-point spread there for Purdue, I think, is probably good. Samford is a team that really, really good last year. I don't think they're going to necessarily fall off. They do lose Keith Glover, guy I love, Bubba Parham, and Logan Dye, 4 of their starters from last year. Those were the top 3. They'd have a lot of production to replace, no doubt. But they're not expected to really take a big step back, and they are, looking at a top 3, top 4 in their conference. So they're not a total scrub team. They can definitely compete. We know Purdue, the whole funny thing, when they get to the tournament, they get knocked off by, these 16 seeds. They're very good during the regular season. Important note there, and Purdue's going to be playing with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and this is one of the better rosters that Coach Matt Painter does have. Transfers coming into Samford, though, there are some familiar names. Rylan Jones played 4 years combined at Utah and Utah State. Zach Loveday, who comes in from Baylor. And then this kid, Dallas Graziano, he's about 5'7", 5'8", real skinny kid. can handle the rock. Played for undefeated D2 champion Nova Southeastern in last season, and he was their guy. And they've been making some pretty funny videos and stuff and talking about he's going to be the one that checks, Edie. Obviously, he's not. But he's not afraid to have the ball in his hands. And this is a Samford team that is going to chuck threes with reckless abandon. Graziano is kind of an interesting GBP type play. And then their top player coming back is Jermaine Marshall. Likely a SoCon Player of the Year candidate, first team all-conference type candidate, can score in a variety of ways, and somebody that I think could actually be fairly decent. Pricing, I will say, on this DraftKings slate is a lot better than last year. Last year, it was so loose. You could play whoever you want. You end up getting this, these slates that are 280 to 290 to 300 to win. Some people like those. I get it. Video game scores, that's fun. I personally like it when slates are tighter. I like when the pricing is so tough you have to make a really difficult decision. And I don't know, man. Something gets me going when you score a 218, a 220, 213, and you win, and you just like slap people with that score. That to me is like, wow, that's a real skill right there, because you're having to find these different guys, and 3.5 to 5x is going to get the job done. This slate's probably going to have its fair share of busts because there are several blowouts. And like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty. Some of these teams that are playing these lower tier teams are going to look at a longer rotation than they're normally going to play, especially in conference play. So you're going to see guys who maybe only play 18 to 22 minutes as opposed to the 30, 35 they'll get in normal competitive games. Samford isn't going to have to worry about that. They'll play their guys. Marshall is 5'4", certainly a doable price. If you want to take a shot on Graziano, he's only $3K the min price. He's probably going to struggle against that Purdue perimeter defense, and he's certainly not going to be driving on Edie either. So it's kind of tough there, but this is a Samford team that's not a scrub team. I want to make that very, very clear. All right, on the Purdue side, and I also want to say this show's probably going to be a little on the long side. 2 hours, definitely. I'm going to be going through exhibition box scores, additional thoughts. I'm just going to do my thing here, and it's probably going to be a little long. So I want to kind of make sure that you guys are aware of that. But I did timestamps last week on the CFB show. That seemed to be responded to well. I will do that again on here in case there's a game you really want to look back on and you don't want to sit through the entire show. I will make sure I do that for you and take care of you guys. All right, Purdue, projected starting lineup. Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Lance Jones, and Zach Edey. Now, during their Euro trip, Kaufman-Renn, somebody who's kind of a breakout candidate, averaged just under 20 points per game. His major upside is a legitimate scorer next to Edey. Problem is he hasn't looked great in the exhibition games just yet. He hasn't looked horrible, but Mason Gillis has been outplaying him off the bench. And it's important to note that in the Arkansas game, in which they lost 81-77, it's an exhibition though, so don't have to get too wrapped up, charity exhibition at that. But towards the latter part of the game, it was not Kaufman-Renn on the floor, it was Mason Gillis. And Gillis played 31 minutes in that one. Kaufman-Renn played 20. He did have 9 points, made some shots, but he was a big-time liability. Couldn't get anything going, got kind of lackadaisical, got a couple shots blocked. And Gillis is just a guy that they've played for years, and he's usually always cheap, and he's a guy you can feel okay about. And Mason Gillis playing 30 minutes against a Samford team, that's probably pretty interesting, or it should be at least. Looking at it, the prices are very tight, though, and I love this because he's 6'3". He's not 4'3" like he would have been last year. And a 6'3" Mason Gillis, that's a whole hell of a lot different than a 4'3". That's not particularly great. If you want to play Zach Edey, you're going to pay a very, very steep price of 10K. He's going to crush the Samford team. He is going to put up a double-double, a quick one as well. The problem is, how many minutes is he realistically going to play? This Purdue team, they're going to want to get some other guys, acclimated, comfortable. There's going to be some missed minutes. There's 2 freshmen who are going to be really good in the future. One being Miles Colvin. He's somebody, GPP at 3.8, we can probably look at in the future as well. Camden Heide, these are guys, just names to know later on down the road. Lance Jones, they bring in as a transfer at 5'9", defensive prowess, very, very heavy on the defensive side. You're mainly going to see Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, not Foster, he's not a brother, and Zach Edey as the primary DFS options on this team, but they're all priced accordingly. Now, in that Arkansas game, Zach Edey had 15 points, 9 rebounds, a block, and a steal. That was in 24 minutes. Did have some foul issues there. That is one thing with Zach that he does have happen. Fletcher Lawyer in that one, 15 points, knocked down a couple triples, 4 rebounds. Certainly looked decent enough. Braden Smith played nearly the entire game, 37 minutes, 7 turnovers though. Don't like that. 12 points, 5 rebounds, had 4 assists. Lance Jones, 9 points there, mostly a defensive player, as I mentioned. Gillis had the 13 and 6. Ethan Morton had 4 rebounds. Caleb First didn't do much of anything, kind of the case with him often. And then they got some minutes for Camden Hyde, A. Miles Colvin, and Brian Waddell. No relation. In the other game that Purdue played against Grace, not the person, a school, this is the stats that we saw. And minutes were very minuscule for players. So, Edie played 17 minutes. Lawyer played 17. Smith, it was 98-51. This was a chance to get other guys minutes. But in those short minutes, Zach had 19 and 9, 2 blocks and a steal. Fletcher, 6 points, 2 steals. Braden Smith, 11, 5 and 6. He's going to flirt with a triple-double. I don't know that he's actually going to deliver the real triple-double, but I think we're going to see a lot of Braden Smith, 12, 7, 4, 12, 6, 9. There's going to be a lot of those type of stat lines for Smith, and he's going to be very valuable. It's just going to be an opportunity cost there. Is he going to continue to drift towards 8K, which I'm not super keen on, or is he going to drift lower towards 7K, which I am a little bit more comfortable with? Trey Kaufman-Renn didn't look too – he did okay, but he was kind of passive, played 14 minutes, and it was, again, another spot where Mason Gillis kind of just outplayed him. So that's something to watch there. For these high major teams, we pretty much can assume what the starting lineups are going to be. For a couple of teams in peril, which we're going to talk about here as we go, we're going to have to pay attention to the stat broadcast page and really make sure. And if you're playing, you're not going to just be able to set – you're not going to go full Ron Popeil and set your lineup and forget it. You're going to have to really be looking at each lock and ensuring that, hey, I got a guy that's starting. Okay, great. Because there's going to be some silliness here. There's going to be some craziness. As the day goes on, I'm going to pull more information off of Twitter, indicating possible minutes, indicating guys who are maybe out, waivers. There's still waivers that haven't been cleared yet. We're starting tomorrow, and the NCAA is screwing around. So Stat Broadcast is going to be our friend. Also, games that aren't on Stat Broadcast, we can look at a site called Sidearm Stats, which also carries live play-by-play and early starting lineups within 1 to 5 minutes before a lock. All right. So looking at it here, I think a lot of people are just immediately going to be like, I got to plug in Zach Edey. I got to get this 40 to 50 points. Now, he can put up a big score here at 10K. I know last year it's like, oh, we're getting a discount right away at 10K. He was, 11, 4, 12K last year. I get it. But, this is starting out at a fairly high price. You can look back to last year and you can see he started at 8-9. So we're a little bit stiffer when it comes to the pricing here on DraftKings, and something that I hope will continue. Braden Smith starts at 7-2. They started him at 3K last year. That would have been idiotic. This slate would have been absolutely horrible if they priced Braden Smith at 3K again. Luckily, they didn't. Even Trey Kaufman-Renn, who I think has GPP upside at 6-2, not that appealing. So I will say, I do like Mason Gillis, even if he doesn't start over Kaufman-Renn. The 6'3" price tag's a little stiff, but we're just going to have to probably deal with it on some of these guys. But it does mean Purdue is not a primary or priority option, I should say, for me. I'm not going to start my lineup off with Purdue guys, and maybe that's a mistake not starting with Edey. I certainly want to play him, but there's a myriad of other options here, and if I can litter my lineup like I normally like to do anyways, which means with 6 to 8K guys, which is that posh play of the day range as well, mind you, I'm going to do that because I prefer to run a more balanced lineup. Balanced Betty, as some may have called it in the past. And then as far as Samford goes, there's GPP shots on those guys, but we want to see what the starting lineup ultimately ends up being on that group. Hey, Jody. Yeah, it's late. I get it. So if you do, man, just check it out on demand. I appreciate you supporting the show. And, make sure you drop a comment at the end if you do watch it on demand. So I know you finished it because, you're always there with me, and I do appreciate that. But, yeah, it's late, and I get it. So, all right, we're going to move on to the next one here. which is Northern Arizona versus UConn, the defending national champion UConn Huskies, 25-point favorites, 140.5 total. This one is interesting because we can pretty much be sure that UConn is going to try and get their freshman group some additional minutes. Right away, I can tell you what their starting lineup's most likely going to be. Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, the transfer from Rutgers, Alex Caravan, my guy, Donovan Clingan, who is healthy enough and available. It was kind of hit or miss there if he was going to play. And probably their top freshman, Stephon Castle, who's likely a one and done. Bench pieces to be aware of for this blowout or likely blowout. Solo ball, Jalen Stewart, who is from the Seattle area, shout out, Jaden Ross, and Samson Johnson. We'll see Hassan Diarra anyways because he's going to be a primary bench piece for them. I think this UConn team probably settles into a 7-8 man rotation, but it's going to be interesting to see which of those freshmen end up being beyond Castle, end up being regular contributors, playing 15 to 25 type minutes, and end up being viable DFS options. I was listening to a UConn centric show earlier while I was finishing my notes, and they seem to think most of the starters are going to play under 25 minutes, which would make sense, definitely. That makes it difficult to pay 8-4 for Clingan. I think in a regular game, competitive and playing would absolutely be in play at 8-4, and he probably still is. Where I'm interested to see is if people are super scared, of the freshman Stephon Castle at almost 8K. That feels like, people would probably go to Spencer or Newton instead, or Caravan, because that's a known quantity. But Castle, man, he's going to be really, really good this year. The opportunities he's going to have, and he potentially is going to end up being, the maybe the second option, probably the third on this team. Just sticks out as a major GPP target that many people are just going to ignore. Now, we can't undersell the loss of a few players on UConn, such as Mr. Triple Double Watch, struggled to shoot Andre Jackson, but there is going to be that opportunity for Castle to just jump right in there, take over a role for Jordan Hawkins in terms of scoring, and do a little bit of everything similar to how Jackson did. Diarra from his time, he's been around. He can shoot a little bit. He can score. He can do a little bit of everything. But he's 6'3" to start, and it's just like, in the past that would have been a 3-8 play. So that's a little bit difficult. I think if you truly want UConn guys in your main, you're looking at Alex Caravan or Tristan Newton. I think I feel most comfortable with those guys. I'm looking at a major breakout season for Caravan. That role he played last year, as a way down in the lineup rotational player, but he got starting minutes, especially got to play against a weaker part of the defense. He got some shots there at the end. He just really started to develop and look well, and I think he's going to take that next step this year. So I'm really excited about Caravan. Big surprise, right? Who's going to step into the Caravan role this year with him stepping up and taking more of an alpha role? Could be a guy like Samson Johnson. A lot of people are excited about him. I'm looking at the two, younger freshmen outside of Ball, outside of Castle, with Jaden Ross or possibly Jalen Stewart. Those guys are both min price. You probably can't realistically play them in your main, but I wouldn't be shocked to see either of them get somewhere between 10 to 12 actual fantasy points in this matchup, which would work out just fine. It's just kind of tough sometimes with those bench pieces. All right. With the Northern Arizona squad, this is a little bit difficult because, they don't have a lot of viability here against the Huskies. Obviously, the one player who would, I guess, be the most viable is Carson Tout, their best player, I would say. Operates very similar to the way that Derek Walker did at Nebraska. You remember Walker, focal point of that offense, score, rebound. He could actually pass as a big man. Tout has that ability to do that as well. So he is in play because of that alone. He does check in at 5'6", but it's going to be tough for him to get rebounds against that UConn front court, that's for sure. I don't know that we really want to mess around with the Lumberjacks too much, but there will be some GPP opportunities here. especially once that starting lineup comes out and we see who it is. But Tout is your main guy there for the Lumberjacks. All right, moving on to one of them. There's only a couple of projected competitive games, right? And this is one of them. And I'm really, really looking to get exposure to this one heavily because I think it is going to be close. And we're talking about the Missouri State versus West Virginia game. This one is depending on where you look, 6.5 point spread, 6 point spread. On DraftKings, it's 6 right now. West Virginia favored by 6, 135.5 over under. Now, West Virginia comes into this one, in a kind of a tough spot, right? Like they are going to be missing a lot of pieces that they thought they were going to have. Starting with Kerr Kriisa, who transfers in to play point guard from Arizona, going to be serving a suspension of 9 games because of benefits that he wasn't supposed to get. NIL wasn't quite, there yet, I guess. So he'll be out. A Cook who transfers in from the Big East. He was injured in one of their exhibition games, so he's going to end up missing this initial game, could actually miss more time as well. And then my dude, Ray Battle, via Washington and Montana State, has not gotten a waiver. He's been denied twice at this point. He would have been a tasty, tasty option at 6'4", but alas, we aren't going to be able to use him. So I know I'm going to get a lot of people looking at West Virginia and seeing all those red outs and questionables and Noah Farrakhan, another guy who's expected to get minutes for this team. He hasn't gotten his waiver yet, so there's a lot for this West Virginia team up in the air. I think it's pertinent to start with their exhibition game that they played against George Mason, and George Mason gave them an actual game. George Mason's going to be pretty damn good, by the way. This is how it shook out. The starting lineup ended up being Kriisa and Cook, so there'll be 2 different starters, right? But Seth Wilson, Josiah Harris, and predictably Syracuse transfer Jesse Edwards. Jesse Edwards had 21 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals. You remember Jesse Edwards at Syracuse went from being a relatively unused player early in his career to an absolute stud last year, put up 40 bangers all the time, 60-plus fantasy point games, just a really, really good play. At 8'7", he is certainly close to a priority play. You get a discount from Zach Edey, and you know that looking at this West Virginia team, they just don't have many options. They're going to have to play Edwards through foul trouble, and he's going to play an absolute F-ton of minutes. His usage is going to be high on this team. He's going to contribute in all categories. Like, he's likely going to be a 10K plus player this year. So the 8.7 price point on him is not going to be something that I think we get for very long. So it starts with him. He's the obvious one, most expensive, and I get that. In that game, Josiah Harris had 12 points, 9 rebounds. Seth Wilson had 7 points. And then Quinn Zielinski off the bench, who was likely going to slide in and take the starter spot for a Cook, and did play 26 minutes once a Cook got injured. 21 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 8 of 10 from the foul line, 5 of 12 from the field, hit 3 threes. So Quinn Zielinski is certainly a guy to look at. 6'6" is rather steep, most definitely. During his Iona tenure, he had some ups and downs, but he was a pretty reliable player during his time there, and is somebody who is going to be forced into big minutes. So I don't mind the idea of using him there at 6'6" as well. You have Kobe Johnson, who played 22 minutes off the bench, a candidate to start with Kerr Kriisa out. Kobe is a tough one to peg. Barely played at times last year. He had some early season success, but it's just, I can't even fathom paying 6.3 for him, even knowing he's going to play more minutes. I just need to see what we get out of him before I start paying a price like that. Seth Wilson checks in at 6'2". Again, a little used player last year, but looked good in the exhibition, will be forced into a bigger role. And then you got the 6K Josiah Harris, who, again, looked good in the exhibition, played very little last year, is going to be forced into a much bigger role. And they're going to have to use this kid, Ofri Nave, who is 3'7". So we'll see what happens there potentially. If he ends up, getting big minutes, we'll have to, but if he's starting, especially, end up using him because they just don't have anyone else that they're going to be able to utilize. but Nave defensively kind of fits the mold of what West Virginia wants to do. And I think he's going to be thrust into some really, really big minutes. So I'm kind of considering him as a main team prospect right now, but I obviously want to dig in a little more, and I want to see what that starting lineup ends up looking like. But I am on board with using multiple West Virginia players. No more than 2 in a lineup, though. It's a 12-game slate. I don't want to be married to a West Virginia stack because there's a chance they come out and actually lose this game against Missouri State. At the very least, Missouri State at +6 is live as hell. Speaking of Missouri State, they have a really nice group. A team that I'm kind of thinking might have a chance to win the MVC. They're not getting all the love for it, but they have a really, really solid group of returners and some new pieces that are going to be productive immediately. Starting lineup likely Chance Moore, who came from the SEC, Alston Mason, Donovan Clay, Matthew Lee, who was a St. Peter's kid, and then NJ Benson. The former 4-star and Xavier transfers Zari Edwards, likely going to either start where Benson started in their exhibition, which I'll pull in a second, or coming off the bench to play a lot of minutes. Clay, one of their best players, likely one of the best players in the conference. And then guys like Mason and Lee are going to be productive for them. And I think that Chance Moore has a chance. I said this during the mid-major show last week, but Chance Moore has a chance to be a really big breakout candidate. So I like the idea of using some of these Missouri State guys. Their exhibition against Westminster obviously blew the doors off them. Moore barely played. None of their starters really played more than 10 minutes in that one, so it's tough to be able to sit here and say, dang, they only played this amount. But we can say that, hey, because Chance Moore played 6 minutes, Alston Mason played 7, Clay 10, Matthew Lee 7, and NJ Benson 9. Those are the starters. Those are likely going to be the guys they rely on, at least initially, and are going to be the starting 5. The freshman, Tyler Bay, good name. Lots of Tyler Bays out there. Played a ton of minutes and wrecked shop, 19 points, 8 rebounds, 4 steals, 2 blocks. Don't expect him to play a big-time role like that, though. Zari Edwards, off the bench, played 10 minutes. That's an indication that they're going to want to use him more. He had 17 points and 3 rebounds during that time. And then Damian Mayo in 12 minutes had 12 points and 2 rebounds. Now, anyone that played over 20 minutes, Dawson Carper, Kenan Gibson, Raphael Ayers, those are guys who project to be deep down the rotation or possibly, just kind of the bench mob, right? So that to me tells me we're probably looking at about an 8-man rotation here. And I can tell you, based off of the exhibition, what I've read, Chance Moore, Alston Mason, Donovan Clay, Matthew Lee, NG Benson, Zari Edwards, Damian Mayo, and maybe Dawson Carper, because he can shoot, is looking at the rotation there. So we look at the prices for Missouri State, and we can definitely use one of these guys in our main lineup. Donovan Clay is 7-7. I think that's a price that people are going to look at. I think it's too high for a guy going up against a high major in West Virginia. And I think maybe if people don't dig in there, maybe they won't realize what they're actually looking at. But this is a very high usage guy. Can defend multiple positions. There's potential foul issues there in this game. But he's going to score a lot of points. He's going to take a lot of shots. He can rebound. He gets assists. He just contributes in all categories. So I do like him at 7-7. Mason, to me, at 5-6 is okay. I feel like if anyone tries to do projections on this slate, that Mason's going to be a guy that maybe kind of rises to the top. But I think Chance Moore is the dude at 5-1. I'm really considering him as the main team play at 5-1. I think he's going to play a bunch of minutes. He's clearly going to start. Now, he came from a high major background where he barely played. And then last year, it was weird because, all this talent coming from, the SEC, they used him in a bench role a lot. He did get some starts, but he played a very minor role. And there were times where his minutes just weren't there. And reading back about that, the coaching staff just really wanted him to develop further, kind of giving him some mental toughness, and now they're going to turn him loose this year. So Chance Moore is looking like a fantastic play at 5-1 to me. I think, with no crease around and that guard lineup for West Virginia looking, there's going to be obviously with, some defense there with Johnson, but I think Moore could blow the doors off that price point of 5-1. And if we get a close game, with overtime potential. Even Moore could be the one that, has that gotta have it score, as Varnicus used to say. Matthew Lee at 4-6, also somewhat interesting. Benson, if he were to start at 3-6, and then Edwards at 3-5. I could see Edwards popping some ownership in there at 3-5, just because people know, hey, this kid comes from Xavier, and especially if he's the starter, not Benson, then we'll see that ownership spike as well. Again, it's just going to come down to looking at the stat broadcast, at the team beat writers, at the Twitter, all that stuff for these starting lineups, because we're going to want to try to stick to starters as best as possible, unless we are confident on one of these high major teams that a certain bench player is going to get minutes, and there are a few. So that wraps up that game. Moving right along. Hey, Gunner, what's up? Hey, what's up, Aaron? Speaking of Christmas Eve, I don't know if you heard the beginning, man, but I did my own variation of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," and I'm actually pretty proud of it. I thought I was gonna. My kids asked me if I was gonna be embarrassed to read something like that, and I was like, hell no. I'm glad to see you though, Aaron. Appreciate you. All right, moving on here to the next game. I love this. I love this shit so much. So much. I love college football. Like, we're doing well at that, and I love it. But college basketball, I love that shit. All right, Radford versus North Carolina. The Tar Heels 19-point favorites, 142 over under. The Radford squad has some names. And price-wise, there are some reasonable options here. During the Radford exhibition, because it's really what we have to go back on, the starting lineup they used was Kenyon Giles, Chandler Turner, Brian Antoine. You may remember Brian Antoine, DeQuan Smith, and Justin Archer. Off the bench playing big minutes were Truth Harris, that is a phenomenal name, Kyle Burns, Deontay Pierce, and Trenton Walters. The top producers, Kenyon Giles, 22 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. Chandler Turner, 21 points, 7 rebounds, and Brian Antoine, 10 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, and a block. Looking at the likely starting lineup for Radford, we have affordable prices everywhere. Antoine at 5'7", at Radford last year, he kind of just, we already know he's a high major talent. It didn't work out for him at that level, but playing for the Highlanders, he was a go-to guy for them and frequently played almost every single minute of every single game. There are other options on Radford, and there certainly will be, that he's going to share the ball with. But he's going to be a primetime facilitator, a primetime scorer, and he's going to be one of their better defenders. So I like Antoine's chances of putting up a decent score here, because he contributes in all categories. Those are guys we want to line our lineups with. Giles only at 5'1". There could be a little mirage with the exhibition there, so we got to be a little bit careful. Truth, at 6'5" there, had some big games. One of their better players, certainly. And then DeQuan Smith at 5'8", who had a really productive shooting season, and is somebody that is going to kind of split the workload at times with Antoine. So there are some nice looks here. I would like to see the starting lineup there to be certain, but you can pretty much be sure that any of Turner, Antoine Smith, Giles, Truth are going to be in play here, even against a perceived tough North Carolina in a tough environment here against North Carolina as well. There's also potential for Radford to lay an egg. I don't want to sit here and be like, yeah, we can stack up Radford, because they're going to put up points. These guys are too low priced. Because there was a game early last year, Radford played Notre Dame, and the prices were cheap. There was a game last year, I believe they played Kansas State. Prices were cheap, and they just sucked. So there is potential for that to happen. On the North Carolina side, it is no Caleb Love. Obviously, no Brady. 2 years removed from Brady Manick, but this team has to have a Brady Manick. They thought it was going to be Pete Nance last year. It wasn't. I really wanted them to go out and get the kid from where he ended up at Tennessee, because Dalton Necht was at Northern Colorado, and is at Tennessee now. Perfect fit for this North Carolina team. Like, I would have probably said, hey, this North Carolina team with a Brady Manick clone is going deep, but they weren't able to seal the deal. They did bring in some 3-point shooters. Their roster is interesting. They do return RJ Davis, who's going to be the all everything for this team. He's going to take a ton of shots, but he's going to be able to kind of play more off the ball, which is much better for him. Next to Caleb Love, that he had to play more of a hybrid facilitator role at times. Davis as the off-ball guy, just focusing on scoring, is just much better for his game. Armando Bacot is eternal, of course, double-double machine. We can expect him to rough this Radford front court up. And then they also bring back Jalen Washington, which was relevant during Bacot missed games. And then it's a bunch of new players. The freshman, Elliot Cadu, potentially an all-timer if he were to stay multiple years, probably won't. He'll be able to run the point for this team. He's going to be a big-time player as a guard. 22 minutes in their exhibition game, 7 points, had 4 assists, 3 rebounds, just a guy that is going to be able to put his teammates in the right position to score. He is going to be racking up assists from day one. We don't get a pricing discount by any means early at 6'6", but if he's a starter and plays 30 minutes like he probably should and will, 6'6" is actually going to look underpriced considering what he'll be able to do. Other players they bring in from Notre Dame, Cormac Ryan for shooting, Paxton Wojcik from the Ivy League for shooting, Harrison Ingram from Stanford to be kind of an all-everything type of player. Now, Ingram went nuts, relatively speaking, in their exhibition against mighty St. Augustine's. 25 minutes of work, 16 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks. Very comfortable. Now, obviously, it's a lot different playing an exhibition game against St. Augustine in the real thing, but still playing Radford, which is going to be a good defensive team in their conference, no doubt. But I'm not exactly scared of them clamping Harrison Ingram. And I think we see a much more aggressive Harrison Ingram this season where he's going to be looking to score more often. And he just has like really good shooters around him. All of these guys, RJ Davis obviously can shoot. Cormac Ryan, just strictly going to be mostly a shooter this year. He can handle that. And then Paxton Wojcik is really just known for his shooting as well. So, and that's going to only help Armando Bacot. Anytime a team dares to double team him, he'll be able to kick it out to one of these guys, rack up assists that way. If anyone dares to try to guard him one-on-one in the post, then he will just score an easy layup, dunk, hook shot, whatever. His low post moves are great. Speaking of Bacot at 9.2, that is affordable considering what he's going to do in this matchup. Bacot is the one player that in potential blowouts that I worry about the least. He has shown us time and time again that he has a very high fantasy point per minute total, and he is generally, even if he has like a porous first half, he's usually going to get that double-double and make it to a, at minimum, 4x number. So it would be shocking if he didn't hit at least 40 in this matchup. So, if it comes down to, hey, do I play Edey or do I play Bacot or do I play Klingon? I'm not probably playing Klingon. I'm leaning Bacot, honestly. I'm leaning Bacot. I'm not trying. Adam Young, editor extraordinaire at FTN and resident Zach Edey haters, probably loving hearing that. I'm not advocating a fade of Edey, but just in a strictly 1-for-1 can only play one of these guys. I'm just leaning Bacot. I'm just based off of what we've seen in the past. RJ Davis at 7.7, that price to me looks good. I would expect him to be, a mid 8K player. I think 7.7 is affordable, and I think he's probably headed for 30+ fantasy points. However, scoring could be spotty at times for RJ Davis. Like, if they're smart, they'll lean into him, yes. But there are other mouths to feed here. Harrison Ingram could potentially get buckets whenever he wants. Like, you're going to be surprised at how different Harrison Ingram looks in Carolina blue than he did in Stanford vomit red. He's going to be really good for this team, and I'm kind of almost like, shoot, should we just play him at 7.4? Kind of feeling like that. Not playing Wojcik or Ryan at mid 7K. Those guys are going to be role players on this team. They'll have games from time to time. We know that Seth Trimble is still around and has the Q tag on DraftKings there, but whatever. And then Jalen Withers didn't play the exhibition. Probably a little bit too high priced on him, even if it does play at 6.5. And even Jalen Washington at 5.8. Like, I love stiff pricing, but this is pretty stiff pricing, but it's good because we don't have just these 3K guys sitting here. If you think it's a total blowout, then you could take a shot at a guy like Zayden High, another freshman that is going to be good in the future at 3K. There are some 3K guys that we can maybe even try to punt. Depending on your contest type, you can maybe use him. But Baycott, Ingram, and Davis, very solid options. Elliott Kadu at 6'6". As long as he's starting, even if he wasn't starting, he'd be fine. But Kadu starting at point guard it's probably a yes for me at 6'6", just so we're on the same page there. All right, we're going to move on to North Carolina Central versus the Kansas Jayhawks. This is one that could get ugly. Kansas 29-point favorites, 141 over and under. NC Central, in their conference, they're going to be fairly decent, honestly. It does get a little bit tough to say, hey, these guys against Kansas, 30-point dogs, like this is a good spot. Because obviously it's not a good spot. This Central team is turning over their roster heavily. They have 6 transfers from the JUCO levels. Brock Williams coming in from High Point, Emmanuel Izenobar from High Point, and Guy Fauntleroy from Austin P. Not your household names by any means, and it's going to be really difficult to envision any of those guys making value. They are cheap, that's for sure. But it's not really anything that I want to get too involved with. I guess based off what I've read, starting wise, like Fauntleroy should handle the rock and get time, and he's there at 3K. So perhaps we can make that work based off the starting lineup. But there's also a vicious perimeter defense looming for this Kansas team. And it just kind of seems like Central's going to have really a difficult time doing much of anything. So not so sure I'm there in my main lineup at this moment in time. Kansas, they have a tune-up game, a couple of exhibition games, one against Fort Hays, the real tough team, and then one against this, lower tier program called Illinois. The Illinois game, they did lose 82-75. Not to panic by any means. Rothbot was panicking, but that's because Kansas, they look like their depth is going to be lacking. And that's great for us for DFS purposes because we know pretty much always with Bill Self teams, he's going to play the shit out of his starters every single game. There will be times where the bench has to play, but he doesn't have a very deep group. And the rotation that he ran against Illinois, every starter except for Elmarco Jackson played 35 minutes or more. Then you had 17 minutes for Nick Timberlake off the bench, the kid from Towson that they brought in to shoot for them. Parker Braun, who comes in from Santa Clara, obviously the brother of another famous Brown, Brown. And he played 7 minutes, and Jamar McDowell played 4 minutes. Zach Clements played 2, but I think Clements is out. He's not going to play, so he's out for the year after that. So this is a tough situation for Kansas, a great situation if we think that Dickinson, Harris, Adams, McCullough, and the freshman Jackson can continue to play 35-plus minutes a night for the next 3.5 months. Now, these are college kids. They should be able to, right? You would think, but it's still very hard on the body to do that. And they're going to need to get some minutes from Parker Brown. They're going to need to get minutes from Timberlake. Might have to thrust McDowell in there, but we're probably looking at, without Clements now, a 7-man rotation. Like easily the starting 5, they're looking like they're going to play. I thought they might start Nick Timberlake, but looks like Jackson, the freshman there. And fouls were a big issue in that Illinois game, by the way. Adams had 6, McCullough had 5, Jackson had 4, Hunter Dickinson had 3, and Nick Timberlake had 3 because he got teed up. So, foul issues could be very, very freaking costly for this Kansas team as we go. Not too worried here against Central, and there will be probably some minutes for some of the bench players to get, but I still think he's going to play these guys 30-plus minutes. Going to have to see something out of Parker Brown this year, I'm pretty sure. So looking at it, the most viable, I want to go to the cheapest. I don't hate the idea of using Hunter Dickinson there at 9.3. We know he has a tendency to really beat up on lower tier teams and teams without a post presence. So he could definitely have a big game. And if we think that, yeah, Self's going to play him 30-plus minutes regardless of score, then it might be tough to fade him because he's going to put up a really big number. Love the Jackson play at 6'5". He didn't play great in that game against Illinois, but he was on the floor a lot. He did take 4 shots, and he looked, a lot better in their scrimmages. But I think he's going to be able to get minutes here, and I think he's going to be a play that we can utilize in our main lineup. I do think he starts, but Timberlake did start the game against Fort Hays. Didn't look great against them either, by the way. So it's kind of going to be up in the air there. But the 4 starters we know for sure: Dickinson, Harris, Adams, and McCullough. McCullough at 6'7", awesome play, right? We know as long as he's healthy and as long as he's not fouling, he's going to flirt with a double-double, triple-double. He's going to put up stats in every category. So Jackson at 6'5", while I like, it is definitely a lot safer to go up 200 more and play McCullough, and it's a lot safer to go up another 200 more and play KJ Adams at 6,900. So the 2 guys I would really be looking at wisely would be Adams and McCullough at those prices. I think they're solid. Nick Timberlake at 8'3" is a no. He has not shown us anything in their exhibition or scrimmages to indicate he's going to put anywhere near the numbers he did during his time with Towson. He's probably a bench player at best at this level. We saw what happened to Yesefu. He won't get dogged that much, but I'm thinking he's going to end up playing like 20 minutes a game at most, which is way less than I initially thought. But sometimes these low to mid-major transfers up, they don't click. So do not play Nick Timberlake at 8'3". And if he goes off in this game, you can come back and make fun of me on Twitter like the guy did on the football show the other day. and I'll be okay with it, but it just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to play Parker Brown at 6'3" either. So keep your player pool with the idea that you're either paying up for Dickinson or you're going to utilize Adams and McCullough. And I don't mind a mid-range balance lineup playing both of those guys. The only reason I'm not really talking about Harris too much at 7'3" is just because we know he's not going to be much of a scorer. He had 7 points, 8 assists, 2 steals in that game against Fort Hays. The game that he played 38 minutes against Illinois, he had 6 points. He had the 8 assists, 2 steals. We know that part of his game is going to be consistent, but he's generally not going to score a lot. And adding Hunter Dickinson in, giving Self a true post player like he likes in the way that Kansas does their best basketball, you can expect Dickinson to take 20 shots a game easily. McCullough to take 10 to 15, Adams to take 10. Just doesn't leave a lot for Adams. So I think we're going to see a lot of 2.9 assists, 3 steal games from him. Not quite my cup of tea there at 7'3", but I am very interested in playing at least one Kansas player, possibly 2 in that primary build, just because I know that they don't have a bench at all. All right, we will move on to the next one here. It's a good turnout tonight, by the way. You guys really, you did it. You did it big. I appreciate it. All right, New Mexico State versus Kentucky. Kentucky 17.5-point favorites, total of 141.5. Now, New Mexico State comes into this one just, they went through it last year. They're in a new conference. Didn't work out in the WAC. They're in the CUSA now. They had to cancel their season midway through because of those scandals with that just awful hazing and other criminal happenings that went through that program. So they got to get a new coach as well. Really no place for that 1970s hazing anymore. So I'm glad that they did make those changes. They do bring in a really strong winning coach from Sam Houston State and Jason Hooten, who won 10-plus games in every year at Sam Houston in conference play. So he's going to do well for this New Mexico State team, I think, in the CUSA. And they do have quite a revamped roster on their hands, but there are some really reasonable names that you're going to probably recognize. Femi Odekale comes in from Pitt, Clarence Jackson from Jacksonville State, Jalen Jackson Posey from Stephen F. Austin, Jordan Rawls from Western Kentucky. I know you guys know that name. Brandon Suggs from UCF. I know you know that name. And Davian Bradford from Wake Forest. Lesser known players, Casio Asego from Sam Houston, Robert Carpenter from Mississippi Valley State was a big time scorer for them 2 years ago, and Christian Cook, a productive D2 transfer. Now, in the infinite cluster F that is the transfer portal and is the NCAA, they have not given waiver decisions to certain players yet. We are starting basketball in less than 24 hours, and there are players still not aware of their waiver status. 2 players on this team for New Mexico State that qualify because they are 2-time transfers, but they are not grad transfers. That is Davian Bradford from Wake Forest and Femi Odekale from Pittsburgh. Neither of them has a decision yet. They don't even have a flat no. Like some of these teams didn't report the decline that the NCAA gave them, and we're just figuring that out now the last couple of days, which makes it tough. But Odekale and Bradford are kind of just waiting and for a decision. They did travel to Kentucky with the team, so they're there. And this could be one of those. Can you imagine like they're warming up and like God, this is horrible, but like the death penalty. They're about to do the flip the switch, and then like the governor sends that guy, and he's like running with the papers, like wait, no, it's a stay. The governor stay. Like, can you imagine this dude like running to the court out of breath? Femi Odekale can play. Get him out there. Put a jersey on him. Let's go. It's ridiculous that they were not no idea if they're going to play. Obviously, at Kentucky, it's not as scary as it used to be. It's certainly not a friendly place, and Kentucky is going to be probably a better team than we are. We joke about them, and I know they've lost some pieces, but they've got some really good talent, and I think they're going to start slow as they usually do, but by conference play, they're going to be really good. The prices on these New Mexico State guys are appealing for me. Odekale would be especially appealing at 5'7". We know he has the capability to hang a big number up. He had a couple of games last year towards the end of the season where he hung like 19, 8 and 5, 4 steals, 14, 11 and 6, 2 steals, big games, 40 plus fantasy point games. So I would love to be able to potentially use him at 5'7", but the likelihood of him getting a waiver before this game even starts seems very, very unlikely, barring, like I said, a dude running through the hall and with the waiver in his hand. Davian Bradford at 3'7". I've been through it with him in the past. He's a value guy, not really consistent by any means, but if he gets a waiver to play at 3'7", he's at least somebody to look at. I do like, if Odekale is not going to get his waiver, Jalen Jackson Posey at 4'5". Don't know that I have the testicular fortitude to use him in my main lineup, but I do think he's going to be one of their key players this season. And if it comes to a slate where New Mexico State's on there and they're playing a CUSA team, he will be a guy that we're talking about utilizing as a main team viable guy and probably like producing like a 7K guy in conference play. So remember that name. Brandon Suggs was a rotational piece for UCF. He's 4'6". So you have him. Jordan Rawls, rotational piece at WKU at 4'9". So there are some interesting looks here. Carpenter at Mississippi Valley State was a 17 point per game scorer. He's min price, but he's also not at Mississippi State anymore. Mississippi Valley State, I should say, the Delta Devils. And that was 2 years ago. So, all right, looking at Kentucky, I just am not a Kentucky fan. Let's start with that. They beat Kentucky State handily. I'm going to start with their exhibition score, their box score here, so we can get an idea of what minutes might look like, because they did play their starters heavily in that game. All 5 of their starters, 20 or plus minutes. 4 of them played 27 or more. The starting lineup they rolled was Justin Edwards, big-time young star. Adu Tiero, has upside if he's going to get minutes this year. Trey Mitchell, who we know is a capable double-double guy with a lot of upside and a high floor. Antonio Reeves, who comes back. The potential of him leaving was really big, and he was actually enrolled in classes at a different school in the summer, but he does come back to babysit this young team. And DJ Wagner, who is DeJuan Wagner's son, decided not to go to Louisville, and that is looking like a very good decision on his part. So that was the starting group. Off the bench, Rob Dillingham, who is going to be a solid player himself. Brendan candidate, Reed Shepard, who is the son of legendary Kentucky player Jeff Shepard, Joey Hart, and Walker Horn. None of those guys really care about. Mainly just the Edwards, Mitchell, Wagner, Reeves group. Now there are 2 other players who are going to be in the rotation. Ugonna Onyeso. He's dealing with the recovery from surgery. And then Aaron Bradshaw, who is going to miss a significant portion of the season, the first month or 2, which is tough. So they're going to be a little lighter than you would have expected. The price on Trey Mitchell at 7.5 is very reasonable. I do like that. My worry is that all these young guards around him are going there that are used to hunting their shots and me first. I do worry about his usage taking a big hit. But you look at what he produced in their exhibition game, it does seem like, they know where their bread and butter might be. 9 shot attempts, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and 3 steals. Like, I could very easily see Trey Mitchell putting up that kind of stat line tomorrow and / today, whenever you're watching this, and consistently being kind of like a 14 and 8 type of player. I think he's going to be really, really good. Antonio Reeves scored 20 points, took over as a 3-point shooter in that game. There's going to be times this year where those younger players freeze up and maybe they miss a couple shots or they're just getting harassed by the defense and they need a bucket. Reeves is going to be the guy that goes out and gets that bucket. 6'9" is a affordable price for the role he's going to have on this team. I know it's more expensive than he ever was last year, but we're going to be inserting him into a role where, he was already shooting 20 times a game last year. There's potential for him to shoot more than that at times. And he's going to have to play most of the game. So I'm 6'9" for Reeves might feel like a lot initially until you get used to this. If this is the new pricing of DK, like golf clap, he's very much in play at that price. Very, very much in play. He's going to put up a big number. Like at the very least, he's going to score like 18 to 20 real points. Whatever he can do above that, peripherals wise, assists, steals, rebounds, whatever, like it's going to be a really good season for Antonio Reeves, no doubt about it. I would have said Adutiero was a sneak, but if he's starting and at 6'2", not maybe too sure about using him just yet. The other youngster, Rob Dillingham, who looked good in their exhibition, pulling it up off the bench there, 8.6 rebounds. He's somebody to at least consider at 4'9". He's I know, and they had another exhibition game where he scored like almost 20 points, but he's somebody that I could see actually using as a value piece in your main as well. With Kentucky being a little shorter handed this year than previous seasons, because usually what happens is Kentucky starts it out with, a 10, 11, 12 guys who legitimately have a claim to play. And it's the same thing with Duke, who incidentally is going to be on the slate to talk about. And it's worrisome from DFS standpoint because there's so many mouths to feed, but Kentucky's actually got a little bit more of a condensed rotation. And that's mainly because not the philosophy change for Calipari, but because he just has guys who would have been in the rotation going to be out. So I'm really kind of feeling this Kentucky team, at least for this slate. And that's a situation for me that I'm not that comfortable with, because I don't know, I guess I'm a blue blood hater. I guess I'm a blue blood hater because I hate using Duke in Kentucky, but sometimes you just got to do it if you want to make money, right? So I'm looking heavily at Reeves, heavily at Trey Mitchell, maybe a little bit at Dillingham there, because theoretically he should get a decent amount of minutes, between 18 to 25, and at that 4.9 price tag, that's going to end up paying off more often than not on a slate like this, where we could see lower scoring due to all that stiff pricing and people playing, 6'6" guys who are normally 4K guys that are going to get 2x at that number. So we're expecting a lower scoring slate. A guy like Rob Dillingham becomes a little bit more valuable than he would be in past years. Edwards at 7.6 and Wagner at 7.2 are also playable. More so maybe GPPs. Edwards did have 17, 9, 2 blocks and steals against Kentucky State. absolutely ripped them apart. He would be the one, if anyone, I'm afraid of fading. It's certainly Edwards. He worries me a lot. Right now, I'm not looking at him as a main team piece, but I could definitely see him being an optimal play or a top 5 scorer on this slate. All right, moving on to the next one here, Morehead State versus Alabama. And this is where it gets fun. Morehead State, kudos to them. Janai Broom goes to Auburn. You would expect them to just be horrendous, and they were actually still pretty damn good. Now they're going to be put to the test, though, because the reigning OVC Player of the Year, Mark Freeman, will miss the entire season with a wrist injury. That's a big kick in the groin for this Morehead State team. They do return some pretty solid production. Drew Thelwell and Khalil Thomas, the main returners now. They do have a transfer from Xavier in Deontay Miles. This is a slate of Xavier transfers, I guess. And then a transfer from the NAIA level scoring machine, Riley Minix, who averaged almost 26 points per game. So probably we're going to be using players against Alabama. Like at this point, we know Alabama, they play at a fun pace, shoot a lot of threes. They like to fast break. Their defense is definitely good, but there is a time and place to use players against Alabama. And we're going to be mini stacking their games a lot. Nothing changes. I do think there is viability with some of these Morehead State guys. Would have loved Freeman at 5'8". That's a damn shame. Thelwell is probably going to be one of the higher usage players on their team. Not super psyched about the $6K price for him, but it is fair. Have seen some Trent Scott chatter amongst Morehead State beat writers. He's there at 3'8". And then Khalil Thomas, one of the other primary starters, who is there at 5'5". The fun stuff, though, is Alabama and where we can really use. And I want to use Aaron Estrada so badly. They did a nice job of pricing him appropriately at 8-9, though. This is a guy, and he's so tailor-made for this Alabama system as a guy that is very comfortable playing at a fast pace. He's very comfortable chucking threes, almost 200 attempts last year, just under 37%. Estrada has high major experience from his time at Oregon. Absolute star at Hofstra. I mean, I can't get over this fit. Of all the transfers, I mean, there's a few really good fits, but this fit in particular between Aaron Estrada and Alabama is just perfect. So I want to find a way to roster him. It's going to be tough. Obviously, he's Edie 10K. We got, Dickinson above 9K. We got Baycott. Like, there's some tough decisions coming this way. And I think Estrada is going to be the odd man out. And that sort of pushes him towards our first posh play of the day of 2023. I'm not declaring him that yet. You're going to have to wait till the very end, but he's in posh play of the day territory, Aaron Estrada, because he's going to score a lot of real points and he's going to score a lot of fantasy points. Averaged over 4.5 assists per game, 5.5 rebounds. He won't rebound like that in the SEC, but his assist number should stay relatively high. So I'm super, super high on him. If people are going to use these Alabama guys, and they will, they're going to use Mark Sears. Mark Sears is sitting there at 7-1. He's dealing with a groin issue, and I know his status is technically up in the air, but I don't feel like he's really in any danger of missing this game. And maybe that keeps his ownership down slightly, but that's a really reasonable price for him considering what this team has. Bama is a 21-point favorite, by the way, and this is the second highest scoring total of the slate at 145. So we love Alabama. I'm going to be utilizing their guys a lot. They do also bring in Grant Nelson at 8-1. I do feel like Grant Nelson will probably garner a decent amount of rostership because people are going to expect him to, be putting up these 50s and 55s. It's important to note Grant Nelson struggled in the past against high major talent. Now, Morehead State is more of the level he was used to dominating at his previous stop in North Dakota State. So I do think he can put up a big score, and he is one that does worry me about a fade. I think as we get it, I really feel like he's primed for a non-con hero season where he's just going to just detonate left and right and be this, 35 fantasy point per game score in the non-con. SEC is going to play, is going to start. Everybody's going to roster him, and he's going to end up putting up like 14 to 20 and just fantasy points and struggle a bit in the SEC. I see that coming from him. Now we have a few Alabama exhibitions, but the most pertinent one to look at is when they played Wake Forest. They did lose that game 88-80. Not that relevant. I only want to bring up that Wake Forest side, Cameron Hildreth scored 38 real points against Alabama. That's what I'm talking about with these stacks against Alabama. Hunter Salas, the Gonzaga transfer, had 27. It's going to be fun. Alabama games are going to be fun. In that one, Nelson Grant fouled out in 29 minutes. He very, very much so did struggle. 11 points, did take 11 shots still, 3 rebounds, an assist, a block, and a steal. I am already kind of planting the seeds for you of a chalk Grant Nelson fade as time goes. I don't know that fading him in this spot is intelligent, but we are going to have some really big spots where Grant Nelson comes in at 35%, and I am going to tell you that I'm fading, and I will recommend fading him because I don't believe in him for the SEC games. And I'm probably the only one in the galaxy who doesn't. So that's an important distinction to make. I also really, really love Aaron Estrada. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. He had 24 points against Wake Forest, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 20 shots. 20 shots. Now, of course, there was no Mark Sears in that game. But even if Sears plays, like he'll handle the rock and he'll run the offense. And Estrada's just, I mean, the green light to drive and drive and drive and shoot and shoot and shoot and do whatever he wants. He's just going to be great. Going to be great. They do have the kid from Fullerton transferred in as well, Latrell Wrightsell. He played pretty big minutes, 30 against Wake Forest, had 8 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Might be a spot to utilize him, but 6K, I don't think his usage is going to drop off. The people who box score watch might look at that and be like, wow, 6K, this guy's pretty good, but he's obviously going to have a much different role than he had at Fullerton, where he goes from being one of the alphas to more of a role player. So be aware of that. I do like the idea of using one of Rylan Griffin or Nick Pringle. Both of them are going to be so much more involved this year. Griffin in the game against Wake Forest, 25 minutes, 8 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. He's going to be able to fill it up. He's not going to do any one category like at a supreme level, but he's going to adequately fill up a box score. And he's under 7K, very much in play. Because I think he's going to be a consistent player this year. Nick Pringle, 13 points, 9 rebounds, and a block in 28 minutes. Look for Pringle to do some damage here. You know, there's, as far as the interior goes, there is an opening for minutes. And we saw Pringle, in short spurts last year. Anytime they gave him big minutes, he just detonated, right? 21 minutes against Corpus, 19 points, 15 rebounds, almost 40 fantasy points. That was a huge one. You go back to an earlier game against Georgia, 21 minutes, 19 points, 12 rebounds, 41 fantasy points. He had a 20 fantasy point game against against Florida. And then you go back to the non-con. He had a 22, a 33. This guy is a really, really sneaky DFS play, high fantasy point per minute player who's going to definitely do some damage. I worry a bit that they're going to want to get minutes for Mo Wag, so that may cap the upside of a guy like Pringle, but he's going to be a really fun player. And with the, the front court being cleared, the deck cleared there, he's going to just get a ton of minutes. And he's a completely different player than Grant Nelson in that he's not afraid to bang down low, and he's going to be able to handle that area. So I'm looking forward to that. The youngster, Jaron Stevenson, he comes in at 4-4. He played 18 minutes as a starter against Wake Forest. Didn't do a lot there. Kind of the potential for him to maybe start, 20 minutes again without Sears. And then Sam Walters, who is 3-7. He absolutely dusted their exhibition games. He had a 13 against Wake, but one of their earlier exhibition / scrimmages, he put up, I believe it was 29. Just ice in his veins in the exhibition season, hitting all these threes. I was against TCU in the scrimmage. That's what it was. 7 triples that he hit. So he might get a little bit of ownership based off of that, but I don't know. If Sears plays minutes-wise for Walters, we're probably looking at like 10. So that's kind of tough. He played 15 against Wake Forest, and yes, he had huge usage, took 9 shots in that 15 minutes. But if Sears plays, I don't know where his time's going to come from. And you're going to see Estrada's minutes elevated to 30 in real games, and Sears playing 30 plus in real games. So it's going to be tough. The only good thing is that it's a blowout situation. So then the levers the other way and saying like, well, Walters might see 15 to 18 minutes in a blowout. The last 5 minutes of the second half, he's going to be chucking. So there is merit to using him at 3-7. That is a name to be aware of. I love this Alabama team this year. Got to tell you. All right, next game on the docket here is NIU versus Marquette. This is actually, at the moment, the highest total on the slate at 147.5. Marquette is 23.5-point favorites. Marquette team that looks pretty identical to last season, sans one player in particular, Oliver Maxence Prosper. Gone, but everyone else returns. Tyler Kolek, Oso Ighodaro, who is due for another major step forward. David Joplin, who is also due for a big breakout. You have Stevie Mitchell there, a rotational piece, Chase Ross, Cam Jones, and Ben Gold. All three of those guys should also take step forwards as well. They would have been playable in this game, and they might still be. But again, DK has really priced stiff. You are not getting any of Ross, Jones, or Gold for under 6.5. That's tough. Or under 6K, I should say. Sorry. Gold is probably the most interesting for a GPP standpoint. I think total season, though, I'm really going to like Chase Ross. I think he's going to get a ton of minutes, and David Joplin stepping forward. Now, Cam Jones at 6'4", that's probably a chalk piece because we saw him at 7K or higher last year. So expect people to be all over him, and that makes a lot of sense as a play. Looking at these prices here, I think he has the potential to be like a top 3 highest owned player on the actual slate. Other relevant rotational piece is Sean Jones, who's down there at 4K, and he is going to see a minutes increase as well. Not sure what the roles of those guys like Ross, Gold, and Jones will be just yet. Talking about Sean Jones, not Cam Jones. But they are expected to all be elevated into, that top 7-8 rotation. Love Joplin at 6'4". I think he's a great pivot off a chalkier Cam. He's going to take a ton of shots this year. He's going to, step into that Prosper role in terms of minutes, starting spot, and usage. Might not give us a whole lot else. Rebound a little bit. He's primarily a scorer, but he's going to be a big time shot maker, shot taker, and he is going to eventually probably become like 7K, 7.5 because of all the points that he's giving us. Like him a lot better than a player like Stevie Mitchell there for 200 more. Ighodaro is going to absolutely manhandle this NIU front court, so he makes a lot of sense at 7.3. And then, of course, Tyler Kolek, who is many publications preseason conference player of the year. Tyler Kolek at 9.1, another one of those marquee players at that 9K range. He's just going to go under owned because people aren't going to be able to fit him. When they're looking at that range, they're going to go to Edey, Baycott. We've already talked about it. They're not going to go to Estrada and Kolek. So if you get yourself an Estrada Kolek lineup cooking there in the GPPs, you might be looking at a pretty fun evening. On the NIU side, they are all relatively cheap for what the starters and the rotation is going to look like. NIU did have an exhibition game here recently against Illinois Wesleyan. Pull that up here right now. Philmon Gabriouette, who is a DePaul transfer, 29 minutes, 14 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, 2 steals. Yannick Conan Niederhauser, that is a mouthful, 16 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks in 26 minutes. Xavier Amos in 27 minutes, 14 points, 9 rebounds, 4 blocks. Zion Russell in 30 minutes, 11, 4, and 3. And then the last starter was Will Lovings-Watts. Just played 13 minutes, had 3 points and a rebound. Zyrick Nutter was the big play off the bench in 21 minutes, 9 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. Also have Corin McPherson, who played 15 minutes, 8 points, 5 rebounds, had a couple of assists. He is a player with a little bit of experience and has high-level talent as well. Don't think I see myself playing too much NIU. I do foresee myself playing guys against Marquette often and comfortably, but this is probably not the team to do it with. Depending on how that starting lineup shakes out, like Gebrawet at 5'1" is definitely playable, but he's going to have Kolick all up in his shorts. Nutter at 5'7", he would make sense as a starter, even off the bench. He's playing bigger minutes. He is a guy who certainly handles heavy usage with them, heavy lifting. And then Niederhauser, who had a pretty decent game there at 3-4 potentially. The Marquette front court, I think, is going to be a DVP spot this year. As good as Ighodaro is, he is a bit more of a finesse player than a banger. And I think anytime you can get a shot blocking, rim protecting, heavy rebounding, physical, muscular, dirty, just grimy type of low post player, they're going to eat Oso Ighodaro. Now, I'm not certainly suggesting anyone on NIU is going to do that, but that is a DVP spot that I want to watch out for early and I want to be aware of going forward. By the way, I don't know if you can see there. Dylan Disu, right? Going to be rocking that, and then from Country the posh shirt. When we do the posh play of the day segment, I gotta have that handy. But I'm just rocking the Disu jersey because the man got me a washer and dryer, and I thank him for that. And my clean clothes, they wouldn't be as clean without Dylan Disu. All right, next game on the slate, JMU versus Michigan State. I like this one. I definitely like this game. It's a 143.5 total. Michigan State 16.5-point favorites. This is a JMU team that can play. They're going to be a problem in their conference. They do bring back Noah Fredo, very strong returner. Terrence Edwards, Julian Wooden. Those are also rotational pieces that return, so there's good continuity there. They were expecting Justin Amade to be a kind of a breakout play, but he will miss the season with a lower body injury, so that hurts. But they do have a glutton of transfers available. TJ Bickerstaff comes in from Boston College, Bryant Randleman from High Point, Raekwon Horton from Charleston, Michael Green from Radford, and Quincy Allen from Colorado. Now, I love Quincy Allen overall. I'm not so sure he's a play yet against that tough Michigan State team, but he's only 3-1. He was a pretty highly ranked recruit coming into Colorado. He didn't get to play a lot for Colorado, but in the short spurts he showed, you could see this was a kid that could definitely play. He's going to be a very good player in a JMU Dukes uniform. I don't want to get myself into early season trouble and play somebody that I'm just like, I like and is kind of trending towards being one of my guys, at least at that level. That 3-1 price is pretty damn appealing. I think the rotation for this team, clearly Friedel, Green coming in, Edwards, Bickerstaff, Wooden, maybe the Randleman kid from High Point, but I think Allen gets a role here, and I do think he ends up playing quite a bit. Reading a few, JMU reports and previews and stuff like that, a lot of people seem to think Quincy Allen is going to be a guy. And the fact that Justin Amade is out means Allen should get that spike immediately. A lot of people think that Raekwon Horton is going to get those minutes, but I don't know. I don't know that Horton wouldn't make a big enough difference right away, and I think Allen just naturally pushes himself into a bigger role. So depending on how fast this turns into a blowout or if JMU keeps it close, I think Quincy Allen might be one of the better values, at least in GPPs. And we're talking like 1% owned here. Edwards at 4.8 is nice. I don't like, he's going to be guarded by some really tough defenders. out there on the perimeter, but he is a viable option at 4.8 because he's going to play a lot of minutes. And then you have obviously Friedel, who is going to be a key cog for this team and play a ton of minutes. He's definitely in play at 5.3. And Green was a very solid option, took a ton of shots during his time at Radford, also at 5.6. So the Dukes players are affordable, and they're absolutely playable in a main lineup. Bickerstaff, even if he starts at 4.6, we know what he can do from his time at BC. He had some big games there for them. Also disappeared a lot, but he can definitely play. And then if it were to be Horton, he's only 4.9 as well. On the Spartan side, not expecting their freshmen to play a whole hell of a lot. Expecting this Spartans depth to be fantasy friendly, in that we know the starters are going to play a ton of minutes. Now, they did lose a tough one to Tennessee in their exhibition. That was the game that Dalton Connect just went absolutely ape shit against them, 28 points. But in that one, Tyson Walker was solid, 5 steals, 22 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. Jaden Akins had 12 points, 6 assists, hit a couple of threes. AJ Hoggard had 14 points, didn't have many assists as you would think. He had 2 because of Akins and Walker, which that's an element of Akins' game I don't really expect to see too much, but that's nice to see. Malik Hall fouled out, but he had 14 points and 11 rebounds. That was huge. And then Matty Sissoko, 5 points, 4 rebounds, 4 turnovers. Jeremy Fears, Carson Cooper, Cohen Carr, Trey Holloman, and Xavier Booker all came off the bench. Xavier Booker is the one that I think will end up being the most intriguing long-term prospect. He's absolutely not in play for me at 6.5. I worry that he will get the classic Izzo. Izzo is kind of like Self. Like, he'll play freshman more than Self, but you know how they are with their youngsters. Like, they don't force them into big minutes, and they won't play them even if people feel they should. Booker played just 8 minutes in that Tennessee game, for what it's worth. Cohen Carr played 16 minutes, had 9 points, 4 rebounds, so a little bit more expected there from Carr. They will be without Jackson Keeler for at least a month, maybe 2. So they are going to have to play a guy like Cooper additional minutes, or Cohen Carr. I don't particularly feel super excited about either of those guys. They're more role players than anything. There may be times where they do produce, like Cooper at 3.4, Carr at 3.9. Like, those are usable prices. I don't know that Matty Sissoko is going to be this suddenly some 30-minute guy. He's still going to be getting in foul trouble. He's still going to be inconsistent. And I think that means that Carr and Cooper are at least intriguing values to consider. Like Malik Hall, also big fan of his. 6.7 might be a bit steep here. Much rather go the Akins route for 100 more. Akins is going to, he was in the NBA draft, doing the camps, doing that thing, decided to come back for 1 more year. So you can expect him to carry a heavy role in this team. But really, the Spartans team is all about that trio of guards with Akins, Tyson Walker, and AJ Hoggard. Now, Hoggard at 8.6, that's going to be tough. We know he can put up a big score, but that's a opportunity cost that I don't think we can afford to pay on this slate. If you want a Spartans guard, you're looking at Akins at the 6.8 or Tyson Walker at 7.4. Walker, it took him a little bit, 2 years ago to get acclimated from the Northeastern University to Michigan State, but last year he was phenomenal. And this is about the price that we're used to seeing for him at 7.4, right around 7K, 7.5, something like that. So we're not out of whack here with him, and he's going to play most of the game. I think the Dukes can give Spartans a little trouble, or at least keep this game competitive throughout, to the point where we know those guards are going to play heavy minutes. So you can absolutely play Walker or Akins if you want to. They're not a priority, but I do think on a balanced build, Akins makes the most sense on the team. If you need a super punt, Cooper or Carr there. The starting lineup should be Sissoko, Hall, Akins, Walker, and Hoggard, for what it's worth. All right, next game, Dartmouth versus Duke. Makes me cringe. 26.5 point favorites are the Blue Devils, 140.5 over under. Dartmouth, they lose Dame Adelkuhn to Loyola Chicago. That's a big loss. He's a passing big man, quarterback type, the Derek Walker type. That's going to be like the the archetype that I use for passing big men now is Derek Walker. But they do return 8 of their top 10 scorers, so they're not losing a ton of continuity there, even though they are losing technically their best player. Ryan Cornish and Dusan Neskovic are the most relevant players here initially, and really the only guys I would be looking to for a lineup purposes. And even then, tough. Cornish is the only guy I think you could consider for your main. Neskovic for a GPP. But I don't know that we're getting there. I'd much rather play like Ryan Antoine or a couple of those other mid-range options that we've talked about. Now, what do we do with Duke besides hate them? This is obviously, to me, I think Michigan State is the one of, if not the best team in the country, and the best chance of winning the tournament because of their experience, but they do lack depth. You want to find this happy medium between too much depth, 9, 10, 11 guys, and not enough depth, 6. Somewhere between 7, 8, 9. That's the spot. So Duke has a myriad of options here. They have a great class as usual. They got Kyle Flipkowski back. They got Jeremy Roach back. Tyrese Proctor is on many breakout lists. Mark Mitchell returning, who I love. And then they just have this influx of talented freshmen. So let's go to the box score here and get an idea of what we might be looking at from their exhibition game against UNC Pembroke. They started Flipkowski, 21 minutes, 17 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Mark Mitchell, 11 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, 2 steals. Kind of a Mark Mitchell stat line. I'm really hoping he takes that step forward, but there's just so many mouths to feed. Tyrese Proctor, 15 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, hit 5 threes. Watch out for Tyrese Proctor, man. The hype on him being a breakout play, I think, is absolutely real. Some of these hyped up, guys are going to break out, like you kind of say, yeah, maybe, but Proctor is the real deal. Jeremy Roach, 13 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 steals. I do think he sucked. The Proctor blow up is going to make Roach suffer a bit, statistically speaking, but he's on that team to be a leader and kind of just pull them through when they need to. And then Jared McCain was the other starter, 15 points, 1 rebound, 2 assists, and a steal. Got to the line 9 times, made all 9 free throws. Off the bench, they played the following players 13 minutes or more: Sean Stewart, TJ Power, Caleb Foster, and Jalen Blakes. Ryan Young wasn't much of a factor. It's going to be hard for him to get minutes, I think, this year. And Jaden Schutt wasn't much of a factor. Hard for him to get minutes as well. So at least we know Flipkowski, Roach, Mitchell, Proctor, and McCain are going to be the primary guys who start typically. And then we'll see, Sean Stewart, maybe a little TJ Power. There are some interesting spots here because Duke should blow the doors off them. So we could see maybe a guy like Jalen Blakes at 4-1, Foster at 4-3, Stewart at 4-9, end up being on the optimal lineup here, depending on if they go to 15 minutes or if they are only at 7 minutes. So that's going to be a tough call. It's going to be tough to get Flip. I think he does see ownership because 9K, people expect him, putting up these 4 or 5x games at that price point. So I do think he sees a surge of rostership. He is not a priority for me. I think, coming into it, not super healthy. ACC Player of the Year, preseason Player of the Year, but I could see them maybe treating him with kid gloves in a game like this because you don't need him to play 35 minutes. You don't need him to be banging on Dartmouth. So I'm a little bit concerned that we see maybe like a sub 30 fantasy point game from him there. And if he's going to be 25% owned or higher, then I'm willing to take that risk. Love Proctor at 7K. My favorite Duke play by far. We saw it, the last month of last season. He started to show like this kid's going to be an NBA player. He's going to be really good if he comes back. It's kind of hit or miss there. And coming back, he's going to be phenomenal. Jeremy Roach is there at 7-3. You know what you're going to get with Roach. You're going to get that 18-24 fantasy point, typically 4x performance. But again, his offense takes a hit with the emergence and maturation of Tyrese Proctor. So I think we see less 20, 23 real point games out of Roach, more 8, 10, 12 real points, maybe his assist number take a step up. Maybe he rebounds a little bit. Maybe he gets his steals because we know he can defend. But overall, if we're talking about Roach versus Proctor, I'm just going to play the cheaper of the two typically, but I'm usually just going to look to Proctor. Unless Proctor's like 9K and Roach was like 6K, then I'm taking Roach. But if they're this close in price, I'm just taking Proctor every time, I think, because I'm that confident in him. The McCain kid at 6'7" is really good too. So it's another guy to consider. McCain maybe more the GPP play, Proctor the primary spot, and then maybe we can cycle through some of these Duke freshmen at cheap prices, or even Blake's, who makes a little bit of sense there. All right, we've got 2 games left. We're flying right on through. The second, so I mentioned there's really very few competitive games on this actual slate, at least projected. We do have the West Virginia Missouri State game that I think will be close, definitely, and then we have this Kansas State versus UCS game. USC, US getting tired, I guess. 3-point favorites are the Trojans. It's 142.5 total. It's a neutral court game in LV, Las Vegas. Love Kansas State here. Now, USC won't have Bronny James, which might make people think, oh, what are they going to do? Bronny is good. Don't get me wrong. You know, there's hype, obviously, the chance to play in the NBA with his dad. Teams are going to want to draft him for that purpose. Had the sudden cardiac arrest, which is the reason he's not going to play in this first game, and he could miss, the first few actually. And that doesn't necessarily hurt them though, because he's not the prize recruit in this class, and he's probably not even the 3rd best player. I'd say at this moment, without any games playing, he's probably the 4th best. No disrespect, but I mean, I don't know that he's going to be that big of a DFS option. Now they do lose Reese Dixon Waters and Drew Peterson. Those are pretty big, but Boogie Ellis returns, Kobe Johnson, Josh Morgan, Kajani Wright, who wasn't used as much last year, but should definitely take a step forward this year. And then our guy, Vincent Uchukwu, we used him a lot as a value, definitely somebody who is going to be tasked with more minutes. Then they get DJ Rodman transferring in from Wazoo, and then the highly rated recruit stud, top of the class, Isaiah Collier, super stud. Love Isaiah Collier. 7K on him. Yes, please. That's a great price. Setting up to be a really lethal, balanced build. If you can just stuff in all the 6 to 8K guys, I know that kind of makes it tough because you want to get Dickinson, you want to get Strada, you want to get Baycott, Edie, but you don't have to. You can build a very strong lineup around guys like Collier. Even though this pricing is tighter, they gave us a gift there with Collier at 7K. And even Boogie Ellis at 7.8. You might remember last year, Boogie was up over 9K towards the end of the season. He played really, really good. Him and this Collier kid are going to be a devastating backcourt in the last year of Zombie Pac-12. But I take the $800 discount on Collier. He truly is the real deal. I believe that, and I'm very, very excited about the chances to use him. Rodman coming in at 6'7". No, right? No. Uchukwu is dealing with injuries again, back issues. I fear that he may never be fully healthy, which is going to make it tough. He's only 4'2", so if he does start, he's right back in the same situation as last year. Anytime he was, he got the spot start here, there, but then he would play 8 minutes, 12 minutes. So it's tough. Even if he does start, you may not get a full run out of him. Just be aware. But at 4'2", he's absolutely in the player pool at the very least. And then you have Morgan at 6'8". He's a true non-con hero. He knocked it out the park in the non-conference last year. Once they got into conference play, it wasn't very good. Keep an eye on Kajani Wright. I do think he becomes a solid role player that is somewhat viable. And then you have Kobe Johnson there at 6'9", one of the best on-ball defenders in the conference. Just swipes steal after steal. Offensively can be challenged at times. He did end the season really, really well. But you have Collier and Bronny James coming in, which makes it kind of tough for his shots. I just don't know between Boogie, Collier, Morgan, Bronny when he's around, like where the shots are going to come from Johnson. I think he's going to be focused way more on his defense. So only $100 discount to Collier, who's going to have the ball in his hands every single time down the court. So that's where my head is at there with USC. Kansas State, we have Tyler Perry coming in at 8K, another fantastic play and just borderline core option there at 8K. Kansas State, how good was Kansas State last year? I took a lot of pride calling that this team's better than people are giving them credit for. Obviously, I didn't think they were going to go that far in the tournament, but I was really, really proud of the way that worked out. And I think they have a great program and a great coach to really kind of, in Jerome Tang, lead them into the next tier here of Kansas State basketball. Now they lose Key Johnson and they lose Marquise Noel, and that is devastating. But they hit the portal, and to bring in Tyler Perry, from North Texas, as good as he was, Conference Player of the Year caliber player, he can step in and fill the role in the scoring, the facilitating, and everything that Noel had. And then you bring in the very gifted Arthur Kaluma from Creighton. A lot of people surprised that Creighton losing pieces from that team last year because of how far they went in the tournament. But Kaluma takes on the Key Johnson role. Expect him to play 35, 38 minutes. And that mid-range jumper that Key Johnson was developing and getting good at, Kaluma can do that. Kaluma can score. He's very, very good. He has post moves. He can hit jumpers. He can hit threes. I love Kaluma on this team. Love Kaluma on this team. Nate Tomlin will not be around. He very serious suspension. I don't need to get into what it was for. Like, who cares? He's going to be out for some significant time, and that was going to be a very key figure for this front court with Nate Tomlin. So now they're going to have to go to Jarrell Colbert, who transferred over last year and redshirted, has a lot of upside. He's going to have to get, minutes. Taj Manning is going to have to fill in. And then, of course, David Nguyen will get some time there as well. Now, in Kansas State's last scrimmage against Emporia State, the rotation that they ran, or the starting group they ran, Cam Carter, can't forget about him, Arthur Kaluma, Taj Manning, Tyler Perry, and David Nguyen. Off the bench was Keith Glover. I mentioned earlier in the show how I love him. Dorian Finster, R.J. Jones, Jarrell Colbert, Will McNair, and Day-Day Ames. Now, Day-Day Ames is another player that's going to end up getting a lot of playing time immediately when it was thought that they might be able to bring him along a lot slower. He's going to be thrust into a much bigger role now. In that game, Cam Carter had 20 real points. Tyler Perry, 8, 5, and 2. He had 19 minutes of play. Expect him to play a whole hell of a lot more. Arthur Kaluma in 28 minutes, 10 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. Keith Glover had 5 points, 3 assists. Day-Day Ames, 11 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Jarrell Colbert looked really good in the 14 minutes he played, 13 points, 5 rebounds, and a steal. The reason I'm harping a little bit on Colbert, I think he's got an outside shot to, if he doesn't start, be one of the first post players off the bench. He is min price at 3K. If he were to start, he becomes an automatic no-brainer play, most definitely. I don't know that he will. Taj Manning also in the running to start there at 4K, or at least get a lot of minutes. He's definitely an interesting play. I thought Keith Glover would be a starter. Didn't happen in those exhibition games, but at Samford, he was a big-time play, has higher major conference experience from his time at Florida, and just a guy that can do a little bit of everything. Very gifted scorer, very good at getting to the rack, very good at drawing fouls and getting to the free throw line. So I think there's a place for Glover to really excel on this roster. And I'm thinking with Tyler Perry, people look at the exhibition scrimmages and say, it's just okay, and overvalue that stuff. Maybe we get Perry at a little bit lower ownership than we should. Perry with Isaiah Collier on the other side, a little two-man stack from this game in a competitive game that should go down to the wire, and genuinely either team can win. Overtime potential, and those two battling it out makes so much sense for your lineup. To me, that's just a complete no-brainer to use those two. If you're not sold on Perry, which I don't know why you wouldn't be, Arthur Kaluma makes sense in this matchup as well. The USC front court being banged up and foul prone, Kaluma is probably going to get to the foul line a lot in this game. And then Cam Carter for GPPs at 6-7 because we know he can put up points in a hurry. All right, last game on the slate here is going to be Fullerton versus SDSU. 15-point favorites are the Aztecs, 131 total, one of the lowest on the slate. Fullerton, it's tough to get too excited about them. They had Latrell Wrightsell maybe, but he transferred over to Bama, which we talked about earlier. They do have several players who are at least interesting once that team gets closer to their conference play. Max Jones, who scored 26 points and dropped 3 dimes in their exhibition. They do have the reigning defensive player of the year in the Big West and Torrey San Antonio. And they have a productive transfer from Alcorn State, Dom Bruton. So there are some names on this team, but typically going against San Diego State, it's not ideal. Bruton at 5'5", Max Jones at 5'9". A year ago, those guys both would have been 3'5" and chalk. Now we know they're priced appropriately and not the greatest plays against SDSU. The price for the Aztecs are high, which is to be expected with the way that this salary on this slate is. Jay Powell is the transfer from Campbell. He is far too priced up at 7.2. People are going to look at his box scores and be like, wow, 48, 50, 42. This guy he's nuts. But we're not at Campbell anymore. And you look at, he played 17 minutes in their exhibition. He didn't start, 4.6 rebounds. Like, he could be nice in this game, but he's there as a rotational piece and not a star like he was in his previous program. The starting group that the Aztecs went with was Micah Parrish, Lamont Butler, Jadon Lede, Reese Waters, we talked about a little earlier, transferring out, and Elijah Saunders. Jadon Lede was excellent, 20 points, 8 rebounds in 25 minutes. If he doesn't foul, he's going to be very good and a very high fantasy point per minute player this year. Lamont Butler, 7 points, 2 rebounds, assists, and a steal. Micah Parrish, 7 points, 6 rebounds. In that one, and Reese Waters, 5 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Important to note that in that one, Darian Trammell did not play. Trammell, obviously, one of the stars of the team, or one of their go-to guys with Matt Bradley gone. Trammell will be a leader on the perimeter for this team. I don't love the idea of using any of these guys. Their prices are a little high. We know rotationally, Aztecs generally go a little deep, and they did in their exhibition game. Miles Heide played 18 minutes. Miles Bird, 18. BJ Davis, 16. And then Jay Powell, 17. So they're liable to go 8, 9, 10 deep in a game like this. Reese Waters makes a lot of sense at 5'5". Somebody who started to play a lot of minutes towards the end of his USC tenure, is a capable fantasy point producer because of his ability to fill it up in multiple categories. So he's probably the most viable for me if you want a late game hammer. Shout out to Aaron. I know you really, really worry about that. Or possibly Elijah Sanders at 3.2, who started and was decent enough in the exhibition, playing just under 20 minutes, 8 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. Granted, Cal State San Marcos is not a up to par opponent, but I don't know that Fullerton is going to give them much trouble at all. So if Sanders starts, and that's the last game, so if you're holding out hope there and that's your last option and you've got a value, you could really hurt yourself. So it might be a thing where you just have to decide, like, if you're playing him or not. And even if he doesn't start, it's probably still looking at a 15 to 18 minutes at worst, which is fine at the 3.2 price point there against a team like Fullerton. All right, that is the slate. We did it. It's kind of early in the season to be dropping posh plays of the day because we just don't know with the way that this is priced. I will give you a core. And as it stands, I'm really looking towards that mid-range balanced lineup because I think that's going to be the ticket. But I'm coring the kid from USC at 7K. I mean, this game against Kansas State is going to be so fun. I would have loved to have been in Vegas to watch it. I'm all over him. On the pay up side, you've got Zach, you've got Dickinson, Baycott, Kolick, Flip, Estrada, Jesse Edwards. There's just so many good plays. I really am going to find it hard not to play Aaron Estrada even at almost 9K, just because I don't know how he doesn't take 20 shots in this game, especially if Sears is out. Even if Sears plays, he may still take 20 plus shots. He's just going to be phenomenal for this team, and they're going to rely on him heavily. So at this moment, and that could change by the time we get to lock, and I'll let you guys know that if it does. But I mean, either way, I'm not going to suddenly be like, nope, I don't like Estrada. So even if he's not a core, I'm still going to have heavy exposure. Love him. And then like the third member of the core, there's a couple of cheapies there, but I'll be a chalk donkey on this one and say Cam Jones, because there's very few misprices on this one, or there's a few misprices, sure, but there's not like broken pricing. And the closest thing to broken price is probably Cam Jones at 6'4". And he's not even like a lock at that price, because we know Cam Jones, he's had stand around games before where he puts up 7, 14, 12. Like, he's fully capable of doing that. But this opponent, the bench that Marquette has, or is strong, but I think shooting wise, they have very few options willing to take the shots that Cam Jones will be willing to take. And 6'4" is just going to be too small of a price for him. And you look at last year, he was above 7K for most of it. So this is one player that they definitely semi-whiffed on in terms of opening day pricing. I'm protecting my posh play of the day record. I don't know how ownership's going to go. Like, aside from Collier, Cam Jones, maybe Tyrese Proctor, like it's just going to be so out of whack. I can't deliver you a posh play of the day. The closest thing that we'll have to that is Aaron Estrada, though, because I just don't see people playing him. Absolutely love Aaron Estrada in this game. We have a couple minutes left, and I'll just kind of recap values, because I know we talked a lot about those higher price guys, and the values are far less slam dunk plays, which is good, which is very good. Keep an eye on the starting situation for Missouri State. Cesare Edwards at 3.5. That's a really solid source of value. Even if he doesn't start, I think he's very much in play. Brian Antoine at 5.7. That's a really strong price for him, even against North Carolina. Femi Odekale, if he gets his waiver at 5.7, that's going to look like an underprice. Chance Moore at 5.1. Love Chance Moore. I think he breaks out. He's definitely a main team viable candidate. Rob Dillingham at 4.9 from Kentucky. Certainly a main team viable candidate. And then guys like Terrence Edwards at 4.8 from JMU, also a value piece that you can use. We will talk more all day in the Discord. Lucky for you, I don't typically work on Mondays at my other job, quote unquote day job. So I will be visible around, working on a very in-depth article. It won't be a top place piece. It will be a game by game, which is very, very strenuous for a 12 gamer, but I want to start the season off with a ton of info here. We will be switching off. Sometimes it'll be a top play style piece. Some days it'll be a game by game piece. And there are going to be 3 CBB super shows a week. This week, I think there's 4. Next one we're going to be is back tomorrow night, right around 9 p.m. PST. But for the majority of the season, we will be doing shows Monday nights for the Tuesday slate, Tuesday nights for the Wednesday slate, and Friday nights for the Saturday slate. So those are the shows. That's the show schedule, and that's when you can expect to see me here chopping it up with guests or by myself and giving you guys the goods when it comes to DFS, betting opportunities, and prize picks. Speaking of betting, I know earlier there was some asks about that. There wasn't a lot of props earlier, but it looks like there is now. Ooh, good. Let's look at that then. All right. Well, I didn't get a chance to look at these beforehand, but we'll end on props, because there's looking like some good ones here. DK's offering some combos. Those were what were bread and butter last year. So the points, rebound, and assists, those combo numbers really did quite well with those. So that's going to be something that we're looking at a lot. And the first one that sticks out, Armando Bacot, 24.5 points, rebounds, assists. Even if it turns into a blowout, Bacot, 12 and 14, get a couple of assists. That just seems way too low. He's going to hit 30 PRA, might even just double, 20 and 10 and be done with it. So over 24.5 PRA for Armando Bacot. That is a very strong one. Derek Simpson of Rutgers, 17.5 PRA. I think he explodes this year. They are playing Princeton, which I don't particularly love the slowness of that, but Simpson over 17.5. Like that one. Ace Baldwin now plays for Penn State. They have his PRA at 20.5. We know how his assists are. He's going to fill the Pickett role, and I know it's a different coaching staff there, but he's going to be a phenomenal player for Penn State. So over 20.5 PRA for Ace Baldwin. That is a strong, strong bet. KJ Adams, we made a lot of money on KJ Adams' PRA last year, so there's no reason not to look at it this year. 16.5 against North Carolina Central, no bench. 16.5 for KJ Adams. Yes, please. AJ Storr, 15.5, playing for Wisconsin this year. They got Tyler Wall, Chucky Hepburn, Steven Crowell. I don't care. AJ Storr is going to be a star. Playing against Arkansas State, over 15.5 PRA. Give me that. Give me that. What else we got? Tyrese Proctor. It's minus 130, but 18.5. Yes, I'll be all over that one as well. Kobe Johnson, kind of like the under 19.5 for Kobe Johnson of USC, just because I think he's going to get steals and not sure what other stats he's going to get with this Collier star coming to the table. We got a big one on Tuesday between Auburn and Baylor. Okay. So those are the props that I like at the moment. And then there were a handful of lines that I like. Missouri State +6. I don't know. It's going to be hard for me to trust West Virginia when half their team couldn't get a waiver, the other half is suspended. So +6 Missouri State. I will definitely be on that. There was Cleveland State +10.5 against Duquesne's. That's a really big one for me. I love Cleveland State. They have really solid talent. I don't know. Duquesne's, they're okay, but 10.5 point favorites. Give me that +10.5 Cleveland State. That is a very solid one. George Mason, they are going to be so good under Tony Skinn this year. Minus 11.5 versus Monmouth. I have bet that game as well. I bet the spread there. Niagara versus Notre Dame. I made decent change on Niagara last year, but no Noah Tomlinson. I do worry about this Notre Dame team winning games this year because they don't have the most talented roster. It's between them and Louisville for worst team in the ACC. But I do like them in this particular matchup against Niagara, -8.5. I've also bet that game. And then there was one more. I just want to make sure it's the right line before we give it. All right. Toledo versus Detroit. That one's 153 total. I did bet the over. Detroit games under Coach Davis, usually very high scoring. They're going to be missing some key pieces there. Toledo also missing some key pieces from a season ago. But I do like the over 153 there. I think both of those teams can come up with that total relatively easy. So that is where we end tonight's show, the first edition of the Super Show that wasn't a preview or a college football show. I hope you guys enjoyed, got lots of information there. Again, we will be back tomorrow night, roughly the same time, breaking down the Tuesday slate, which should be a doozy as well. Continue to support the show. Make sure you hit that like button, drop a comment, share it, retweet, all that good stuff. It helps us very much. And again, if you're not a member of the FTN community yet, please take advantage of that 50% off code Night Hoops for your first month of subscription. That is going to be a very, very great deal. I feel like the Discord alone is worth it, but the content that we provide, the projections, the optimizers, the pro sports, the college sports, the niche sports, well worth it. You will definitely enjoy it. Thanks, guys. Take care. Best of luck tomorrow. And it's Christmas. Let's get it. See you.